Ladies and gentlemen, how do?
While families in Texas were grieving the loss of their loved ones, what was head of Homeland Security and the person in charge of FEMA and disaster relief doing? Did they spring into action and get on the first available flight to Texas? Were they having frantic phone calls with the relief agencies and arranging for the troops to get boots on the ground and build makeshift shelters and distribute emergency aid? Well-known cosplay Krusty Noam was busying herself on Instagram asking people, which one of these do you like for the official governor's portrait to hang in the South Dakota state capitol? A role that she no longer has anything to do with, but she couldn't resist playing dress up. There were some varied responses from the crowd on Instagram. Some were supportive and gave her the showing your best side, looking strong and you go girl comments. Others were less supportive, shall we say, and were either outwardly mocking her gross stupidity or had some very dark but true humor. Like Kathy Lau, where's the dog? Oh, that's right, you shot him. Like the real Nick B, his comment read, maybe the one with the flood and you doing nothing about it, and maybe a kid floating by. These ugly portraits, and the fact that Cosplay Krusty, the woman who bought a new outfit to visit the concentration camp they delightfully nicknamed Alligator Alcatraz, show that Krusty Noam, who waited more than 72 hours before doing anything for those poor souls in Texas, cares more about her stupid image than she does about doing her job and people's actual lives.
Good evening from New York. I'm Chris Hayes. 7 days after that tragic flooding in Texas, at least 121 people have been confirmed dead, while 166 are still missing. Almost a week out from the initial flooding, search and rescue operations have now shifted to a recovery phase as hope of finding survivors dwindles. And with that horrible reality front of mind, we're starting to learn the ways in which the Trump administration failed in its response to that deadly flooding. According to an eye-opening new report, Secretary of Homeland Security Kristi Noem, the person ultimately in charge of the Federal Emergency Management Agency, or FEMA, delayed the federal response to that deadly flooding for more than 3 days, even as local search and rescue teams raced to find survivors. Kristi Noem is one of the most powerful people in the U.S. government. She has a profoundly important job and responsibility, and her tenure has been enormously destructive through the intentional dismantling of so much about the fabric of this country, but particularly our emergency disaster response infrastructure, which is, of course, critical to disasters like the flooding in Central Texas. Now, back in June, there's a somewhat little noticed item. We learned about a new policy from the secretary, which, get this, required her direct approval of any DHS contract worth more than $100,000. At the time, lots of folks pointed out how absolutely ludicrous that policy was. One outlet, a federal news network, called it, quote, absolutely nuts in a headline. The Daily Kos warned that Noam's DHS disaster could wreck FEMA. I mean, we're talking about an agency that routinely spends billions of dollars on disaster relief. $100,000 is pennies in comparison to what FEMA needs to be able to spend quickly. It was obvious to anyone that knows anything about disaster relief that requiring the secretary's personal approval would create an enormous bottleneck and delay in a situation where time is of the essence. That is exactly what happened. According to a new report citing multiple FEMA sources, Secretary Noem did not sign off on deploying the agency's urban search and rescue team to Texas until this Monday, more than 3 days after the flood struck. Now, You might be wondering what Secretary Noam was doing over that holiday weekend. It turns out on Sunday, one day before finally signing off on the FEMA funding, as search and rescue efforts were frantically ongoing on the ground there, and the clock was ticking to find survivors, Noam did take the time to go to Instagram to generate some audience engagement. Quote, "Which one do you like for the official governor's portrait to hang in the South Dakota State Capitol? Thank you, David Ewell." Which portrait of herself should be displayed in her old capital? This portrait of Noam on horseback? Or this portrait of Noam on horseback? Or perhaps this portrait of Noam on horseback? When pressed about this reporting on Fox News, Secretary Noam didn't exactly deny it.
CNN is basically got a report accusing you of slowing the process. Would you like to respond to that?
Well, there you go. Fake news. CNN, again, is absolutely trash what they are doing by saying that, because our Coast Guard, our Border Patrol, BORTAC teams were there immediately. Every single thing I was on, they asked for, we were there.
Well, that's not a denial, right? Because it was the search and rescue teams at issue, and it wasn't that they were denied authorization. It's that it came 3 days late. Noam probably doesn't need to worry about her job. I would worry about my own conscience, actually. But she doesn't need to worry about her job. Her boss thinks she's doing a, how would we call it, a heck of a job, to coin a phrase. In fact, her boss just spoke to NBC News' Kristen Welker about it. We don't have a recording, but here's the transcript of what he said when Welker asked, there are these reports that have come out that Secretary Noam, I guess, had to have signed off on FEMA expenditures, and they may have delayed some of the response. Trump responds, quote, "I don't know anything about it. We were right on time. We were there. In fact, she was the first one I saw on television. She was there right from the beginning, and when she would not have needed anything, she had the right to do it, but she was literally the first person I saw on television that morning when we all woke up and saw this tragedy that took place during the evening, and she was right on the ball. She's done a great job." She was on TV. So obviously she's doing a great job, right? The thing is, Secretary Noam fundamentally believes that the federal government, and by extension herself, doesn't manage federal disasters. So, not our problem.
We as a federal government don't manage these disasters. The state does. We come in and support them. And that's exactly what we did here in this situation.
Massive shout out to the lads over on ALLSharts AI for making my words come to life. Say hello to them. Well, folks, if you enjoyed this video, then not only are you lovely people, but you also have great taste, and you should also subscribe to the Two Davies for news and politics from a very Scottish perspective, and that rantastic Mr. McGinnis. You should also subscribe to Mr. Daily Blasé's channel for merriment, mischief, and the Friday frolics. Cue growling cat.